Hi everyone, welcome to another Musing On episode. So I was trying out a few ideas last night for different various content for this series, and as I'd been doing a lot of sort of music related searches, a few ideas came into my head about what I could do, and then I had a bit of a eureka moment, and I thought, what I should do is get Copilot, which was originally Bing Chat, to do like a Ask Me Anything about music genres, tastes and bands, and just see what comes up and just get it to pick my brains. So we're going to have a bit of a Q&A here with Copilot as the entity asking the questions, and we'll see what rabbit holes we end up down. I've got a tab off to the side, just there, that's why you might hear me tapping away, not seeing anything on screen, just in case I need to refresh my memory about some musical facts. If it comes up as a side, not to necessarily answer the question, but to add a bit of context to the question. Sometimes I might not be able to remember a certain album by a certain artist from way back. So we'll see how we go. So I'm just going to keep it asking the same question over and over again about, one question for an AMA, and ask me anything about music genres, taste and bands. What was the defining moment or experience that shaped your musical taste and led to your favourite genre? Wow, that's a good question. So I suppose it's got to be, and this is probably parts of this story I've probably told multiple times, it's probably Top of the Pops. And I was actually thinking about this separately this morning without realising this was a sort of question that might come up. And I was thinking a lot about, sometimes you'll have a defining moment where you maybe heard an album around a friend's house. Or maybe it was hearing something on the radio. And I was trying to think like the first band that I really, fell in love with would have been Queen. But I've often wondered, was there something that sort of funneled me down that direction? And I was just trying to think like what gave me a bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for, predilection, or trying to think of the right word here, but what sort of shaped my brain a bit in terms of sort of me liking heavier styles of music. And I'm thinking, it's probably something like This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us by Sparks. And I'm just going to check when that came out. 1974. That one there. From Camino My House. I love this song, still do. I was actually lucky enough to see them in Toronto in the 2010 sometime. And they were still just as good then. They just looked so like young still, relatively speaking. Like it was strange. So and there's another reference there. This is bringing back memories actually. It says held off the top spot by the Rubettes, Sugar Baby Love. And the reason why I was thinking about the day is because I was trying to work out whether this predates things like Bohemian Rhapsody, which it does. I'm trying to think when Killer Queen came out. The actual single. October. So yeah, so it predates that. So I would say, if I'm being really, you know, really analysing my musical taste, I would say it's This Town Ain't Big Enough for the Both of Us. And that opened up like that sort of glam rock area and sort of slightly over the top performances and pomp stuff, yeah. And then that was a sort of gateway drug to Queen. I didn't own Camino in my house until, in fact, I don't even know if I do own it, thinking about it. I'm not sure on that. I'd have to look. If I do, it's a CD, but not, you know, I would say if I do have a copy of it somewhere, I wouldn't have bought it till the 2000s maybe, and if I didn't, then I probably wouldn't listen to it digitally until 2010s. Okay, so let's do Ask Me Another. Oh, this is going to be fun. Oh yeah, and if you fancy you know, answering any of these in the comment section, yeah, please feel free. I'll try and remember not to clear this at the end, and I'm going to copy these into the description of the video. Okay, what else we got? If you could attend a concert of any band or artist, past or present, who would it be and why? Let me think of someone I'd really like to see and haven't seen. It's interesting because part of what led me to this, I suppose, a little bit, is I was having a conversation over breakfast a couple of days ago about you know, stuff to do with favourite bands and favourite tours and gigs and stuff like that, and it was I was trying to think of like what was my favourite gig of all time, and it was a toss up between, I think, seeing Sisters of Mercy in '85 and seeing Ghost sometime in the 2010s. I'm not sure when it was. I mean, I've been to see loads of really good gigs over the years, but those two definitely rise to top of the pile. The best sounding gig, audio quality wise, was Megadeth, sometime in the early 2000s, I think. It was around the time of, is it A World Needs a Hero or something like that? I can't remember the name of the album. It was after, it was actually after Marty had left the band, and they were trying to remember the name of the guitarist that took over from him. I saw them then, and it would have been nice to see. So actually, that probably, that's what I was trying to think. Like, would there be an incarnation of a band that I've seen already in a different incarnation, if that makes sense? And that would be one possible choice, would be Marty Friedman era Megadeth. I've seen lots of bands at different times in their career. So I saw Judas Priest circa Point of Entry. Then again, when Ripper Owens was fronting them around the time of Demolition. And separately, I saw Halford, Rob Halford with his band around the same time. And then I saw Judas Priest again. And I'm trying to remember around the time, was it around the time of maybe Firepower or just, I was trying to remember who was still in the band at the point I saw them in Halifax in the 2010s. And I'm trying to remember if KK was still in the band. I think he might have been. I think Glenn Tipton was still playing live as well. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of anybody else. It would probably be, like I said, either a band that I've seen already but in a different incarnation. I wouldn't have mind seeing an early, I saw like a later version of The Cure around the time of Head on the Door. I would have loved to have seen them when maybe they were a three-piece, or around the time of when what would it be? So either the original band, was it Dempsey was the original bass player, something like that, or the incarnation just after that, around the time of a Forest and stuff like that. Probably. Any band that yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's any thrash bands I've not seen who I wouldn't mind seeing. I did see, I'm saying like again, thinking about it, like I wouldn't mind seeing like a I saw like a later version of Metallica, so I wouldn't mind seeing around the time of, you know, Cliff Burton, somebody like the era like that. Wouldn't mind to have gone to see Iggy Pop in his heyday, or I did see Henry Rollins on a spoken word tour. It would have been interesting to see him fronting either Black Flag or his own band. I've never seen him sort of in a music environment, only doing spoken word. Yeah, I don't know beyond that, but I think, yeah, definitely a Marty Friedman version of Megadeth would have been really cool. In fact, get opportunity to see all the different versions of Megadeth over the years. So, you know, the lineup from the first two albums, the lineup from, was it So Far So Good So What? Then sort of various incarnations thereof would be cool. I'm trying to think of the bands that I've seen multiple times, actually. Been lucky enough to see, and if there's anyone now. I'm just trying to think anybody recent that I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't mind going to see Power Trip when the singer was still alive. That would have been good. Oh, I tell you what, yeah. Was it Warhorse? Trying to think of a slightly mellower band. Oh, I know. Slow Dive. Yeah. During their really ambient period, I would have loved to have gone and seen Slow Dive. So yeah, probably toss up between Marty Friedman, Megadeth, or Slow Dive during their most ambient period. That's quite a long answer to that one, but it really got me thinking. Oh, I'm really enjoying this, actually. And also let me know in the comments if you want me to do this again with another topic, because this looks like fun, actually. Okay, so next question, I suppose. Ask me another. Maybe I should say please. It's only 3. What is a lesser known band or artist that you think deserves more recognition? Wow. I must admit, I'm not very good at the moment in keeping up to date with everything. I've always felt that in terms of the older bands that have been around that I've sort of rediscovered or got into a lot later, I think I get the impression that Belle and Sebastian don't really get the sort of recognition they deserve. So they're if you don't know them, they're a Scottish indie band, got a very unique sound. Been going since '96. Yeah, limited commercial success. So if you like wistful pop, I thoroughly recommend this band. So definitely Belle and Sebastian would be up there. They do get some, you know, they're lauded by the critics. That's the only thing. So they do get critical acclaim. They just don't get commercial success necessarily, or according to Wikipedia anyway. So that would be up there. I'm just trying to think. There's a lot of really interesting bands, but I mean within the genre they get recognition, but there's a whole there's often these sort of bands that are around in the early days of certain genres, or there's like some regional scenes. I think that you know, You Wish the band's got a bit more recognition, but because they were late to the party. I'm thinking of like there's a lot of bands around the time of the late 80s, sort of the UK thrash scene, bands like Sabat, and I don't really know how much recognition they've got. So often think of, you know, bands like that, you know, these sort of slightly more obscure regional bands. One of my favourite sort of just musicians, just guitarists, is a chap called RJ Ronquillo. Sorry, I'm going to mangle his name. RJ Ronquillo. Yeah, I don't know if anybody knows him, this fella. Really good guitarist, session player, you know, gigged with various bands. Yeah, so there's I think, yeah, that's actually one thing that fascinates me is actually, you know, session musicians that don't always get the recognition they deserve. And then you've got someone like RJ Ronquillo. I first discovered him when he was playing. There was something on YouTube where it was one of these bands, I think, of musicians and sort of celebrities that were playing at the Viper Room, I think, and they did a cover of Detroit Rock City, I think. And I'm trying to remember, there was a member of, or an ex-member, I'm trying to remember at the time, was an ex-member or current guitarist of Kiss, but I think they were playing in it as well. And RJ Ronquillo was playing as in with them, so it's like I think a 4-piece. I'm trying to remember who was doing the vocals on that, and that's when I first came across it. And then yeah, it was really through the demos of the Eastwood guitar stuff that then I, you know, watched more stuff. So yeah, there's that is a really interesting rabbit hole to go down if you're, you know, interested in guitar. Is the whole area of touring guitarists and session musicians. I've known, sort of personally, at least one touring guitarist, and they got loads of interesting stories to tell. I knew a guy that demoed for Marshall for a period of time, and he was a touring guitarist. This is way back in I think the 80s or the 90s. He was a friend of a friend, basically. And we went up to see him demoing Marshall stuff, and had a really nice chat with him. Very approachable guy, and we were just talking about, you know, various tours he'd been, I think, as either guitarist, or I think maybe sometimes he did guitar tech as well. I think he might have even played on a Michael Schenker tour at some point, if my memory serves me correctly as well. This is not RJ Ronquillo I'm now burbling on about. This is the session musician who I did meet, and I can't remember his name. Yeah, unfortunately. Okay, let's ask me another. Yeah, it has a lot. You know, definitely started off with hard rock, into metal. So yeah, what's done that? So yeah, like I said in my first question, the first answer, probably, you know, initially Sparks and then Queen, and then listening to the Friday Rock Show one fateful Friday evening in '79 after it had been running for a year, and I tuned in, and they had like top 10 tracks that were voted by the listeners after the first year, and I heard Rainbow Rising by Rainbow, and I was just hooked, and so then it made me want to listen to the rock show. And of course at the time, '79, you got the new wave of British heavy metal, so they were playing, you know, tracks by established hard rock and pre-new wave of British heavy metal artists like, you know, Priest, they were playing, and then other just hard rock stuff, so Thin Lizzy, you know, all sorts of stuff, Rory Gallagher, even, you know, bits of, you know, punk bands that had a bit of a sort of hard rock following, so you know, slightly later, was sort of, you know, 79 era, the, you know, Damned, a lot of Sessions as well, so they had all the upcoming new album stuff then, for like Def Leppard, Iron Maiden, Angel Witch, so that really solidified that, just listening to that week after week on a Friday night, and he's listening to all this, like, you know, hard rock, metal, southern rock that used to get played on there. Yeah, so that was a massive influence. Now, prior to that, I, you know, just through listening to the, so yeah, let me just bring that up first. So yeah, Friday Rock Show, yeah, 78, and I think in here, yeah, so this was the top 10 that, you know, I tuned in one evening and they were working their way through this. And yeah, this track, boom. Yeah. Really cool show. And there's an archive of them. You can still listen to them. Someone's uploaded a load of MP3s. It must have originally recorded on tape. So yeah, so Friday Rock Show. And then I'd had a bit of a soft spot for punk, 77, 78, but I didn't really buy any albums till punk albums till about 79. So then I started infilling a bit with bands like that I really liked at the time, like the Ruts and Skids, and so there was always this sort of undercurrent of, you know, which I suppose punk then went into post-punk and then into indie, then alternative. So I had these sort of two, if you like, paths going simultaneously. As I had more disposable income, there was the sort of, you know, heavy metal, hard rock path, and then there was this sort of punk, post-punk, indie path, and then it was really from that you know, everything just kept forking out. So, you know, like 85, I started to go into a lot of gigs, and it tended to be more indie band, you know, like Sisters of Mercy, The Alarm, Big Country, all those sort of bands. So like the newer guitar bands, if you like, which was how I was sort of introduced to those. A friend of me was saying, you know, you like guitar-based music, you should check out all these, you know, bands that are up and coming, bands like U2, and then that led to a whole load of other bands as well, and through going to gigs, and that got me hearing support bands that I wasn't aware of, like March Violets, and I'm trying to think who else as well. But yeah, yeah, there was a sort of slow change, and then over time it just got more diverse, and I'd sort of switch backwards and forwards. There'd be years where I was more into more sort of extreme music predominantly, so like, you know, during the sort of thrash period and death metal period, and then that would flip-flop between that and sort of indie or ambient, and it would just go backwards and forwards. So over the years my taste got wider, and then I started listening to classical music, which I think is inevitable if you're into hard rock, heavy metal. You get interested in sort of, you know, heavy things like Holt's Planets and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's really it. So it's a combination, I think, of, you know, lots of things: going to gigs, reading music magazines, talking with friends about music, you know, just constantly talking about music. So, you know, my wife's a big music fan. You know, it's inevitable that you end up absorbing lots of music, and then of course once you get onto the you know, I remember an age where I've said before of cheap CDs where people were just offloading their CDs, so that I did a lot of infilling, and checked out a lot of classic rock that I hadn't listened to before, and then of course in the era of Spotify, you know, it's just like a smorgasbord. So yeah, wow, and I could go on. It's a really it's really quite confusing to trace like my musical DNA. What is a song or album that you feel most significant impact on your life and why? How did that differ from the first question? Defining moment that shaped my musical taste. Okay. Significant impact on your life. Yeah, what's the most life-changing album? I mean, I'll bookend my first answer originally, because that you could say, you know, that did, because music's so integral to my life, that had the massive impact, you know, hearing This Talent Big Enough for Both of Us. So then, I was just trying to think, what was the first thing on vinyl I bought? I suppose I was just trying to think whether something like, so when you listen to, you know, like hard rock, sort of heavy metal, the early stuff tends to be fairly, there's not always a lot of social commentary in the lyrics. I would say probably when I've heard the Trust album Repression, that really had quite a significant impact on my sort of what I started listening to. Yeah, probably that, because that. So let me try and see if I can bring that. So Trust, if you don't know them, are a French band that I think technically they predate Nawubum. I mean, they're not part of Nawubum, obviously not being a British heavy metal band, but they were around in that period, and they're really interesting because they have, they've got this real sort of slightly punky feel to them that you can definitely hear sort of, you know, AC/DC influence in there. I know they were, they'd been on tour with them just before Bon Scott died, because when I bought the album, there's a little poster in there of Bernard sitting somewhere, must be in some on tour, like in a dressing room somewhere, with Bon Scott. Yeah, so they rose to fame 79-80. So it's hard rock, but with social political commentary and this sort of slight anarchistic overtones, which then led me to into sort of anarcho-punk as well. So probably I would say maybe that album, because it was a real big deal at the time, because you didn't really hear that sort of like lyrical content necessarily. I mean, it wasn't completely not there in bands. I mean, you know, there's quite a few, you know, like Thin Lizzy tracks and Priest tracks that have, you know, social commentary in them. So, you know, I would say that, you know, it wasn't unusual it wasn't, they weren't exclusively doing it, but it was unusual for everything else that I was listening to at the time to some degree. So yeah, because a lot of stuff I was listening to was a little bit more sort of sword and sorcery type stuff. With again a few exceptions, but this was just sort of out and out, very raw. And what was interesting was that album that Repression. So I've got both versions of this. So I've got the English version on vinyl, and then I've got, later I bought the French version on CD, and I've loved the French version because it sounds much more in your face and aggressive when it's sung in French. Also, interestingly enough, the saxophone solo on track 7, Pick Me Up, Put Me Down, I think isn't as predominant. So in the English version here, it's the 1980s came out, it's not going to show any information about that. Oh, look, there you go, see. It's always sounded to me after listening to the CD version that the sax solo was dialed down a bit. If it might even not be there at all. I have to listen to that album again at some point. The only one on the English version that's still in French is this one, La Mitad. Yeah. Yeah, so probably that sort of band. But I'm sure I could think of other albums. But I think that's the first one that really sent me off on a completely different, direction. Ask me another, please. That's an interesting question, though, because there's lots of different reasons. Like, there's some albums that really give you, like, hope, or, sort of enlighten you. Oh dear, if you could create a supergroup with any musicians from different bands or genres. Funnily enough, I'm not necessarily a big fan of supergroups. I quite like it when, it's difficult, isn't it? Because there's quite a few instances where you discover there's a musician that's using someone else's backing band. So I always find that really cool. Or you find the sort of lineage of the band. Like, it was always really cool. I remember when I was able to see both Halford and, so Halford had this amazing backing band that could basically pretty much play any Judas Priest track from like way back. And when I saw them live, they were playing all these like deep cuts from, albums, early, as sort of, I suppose, well, not really, if you could call them covers, but basically it was, Rob Halford singing them, but the band weren't Judas Priest. But yeah, it was just amazing to hear these like almost like note perfect covers, because he had just this incredible backing band. But then being able to go and see Judas Priest, but with Ripper Owens fronting them, it just gave it a different feel. And I was actually hoping they would just carry on like that, because you got like these two fantastic bands. I was pretty pleased when everything sort of came back together. And it's interesting now you've got KK Downing's Priest, which has KK Downing in it and Ripper Owens on vocals, I think, if that's still the case. And I think accidentally over the years there's a lot of bands that have accidentally become supergroups because of who they've chosen to be their backup musicians. And like sometimes it always felt that Arch Enemy were a supergroup at various stages in their career. So I think we do tend to forget a lot of bands have certain musical heritage anyway, and maybe just because we're not familiar with the bands that they came from. So yeah, it's a tough one. I don't know if I can really answer it, because a lot of my favourite groups are already groups that have been formed from bands that are, you know, members are from some other band that are big. And I think what makes bands, I like the bands that I do, is because of that sort of mixture, and not necessarily having everybody in the band that's like a musical, what do you call it, you know, who's like just really, really, really over the top competent. I try and think of a term for that. Yeah, so could I have a stab at it? Maybe. I quite enjoy it when you get supergroups with, like it's, you know, instrumental supergroups with sort of well-known guitarists. I'm just trying to think who I'd like to hear playing together as a guitarist. It might be interesting to hear like people that are completely the anathema of one another. I don't know, like so. I'm trying to think of a name now. Is it Belinda Butcher? I'm trying to think of the name of one of the guitarists from Slowdive, with like, so like, and more of a like an ambient guitarist, but then with someone like Joe Satriani, you know, soloing over the top. So yeah, that would be an interesting supergroup. I'm trying to think who would really work on drums. It's just yeah, it would be cool. I think, okay, so I think I've got my answer. Just pick the most desperate set of musicians that are, you know, known for completely different styles. There's an interesting YouTube channel to do with drumming, where they take drummers from one style and get them to play drums on an album that isn't in their style. And so I find things like that pretty fascinating. So yeah, I think, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think who's a nice, really sort of solid rock drummer, and then pair them with like one guitarist who's so I suppose conceptually what I'd like to probably hear is what about I think I'm nearly there. What do I have on bass? Yeah, so guitarist from Slowdive, someone like Joe Satriani, that's two guitarists. Bass player, oh yeah, what about the bass player? I'm trying to think of someone who it might be a bit over the top. So the guy, I don't know, it's a sort of 6-string combination instrument, but the guy from who did the album Mirror Reaper? I can't remember their name now. The band, they're like this really slow funeral doom band. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, it's gone. But yeah, someone like that. And then who would I have on vocals? I don't know, Garl. Someone like that. And the drummer, pretty solid. Who's a really solid sort of rock drummer that you can really like lays down a real solid beat. Not overly technical. I don't know if you can come up with any suggestions for a possible drummer. Notes in the comment section. I was trying to think, who's the name of, what about Razzle? I know he's dead, but someone from somewhere like, oh, I know. Yeah, it's just reminding me of another band. The drummer from Helicopters. Yeah. yeah, that sort of that sort of thing. Okay, that's a bit of a roundabout answer, but yeah, tough one to do, that one. I think I might have to stop it here, maybe. What is a genre of music you didn't initially like but grew to appreciate over time? And the change... that's a tricky one. I mean, a lot of times there's been some certain genres of music have been really abrasive to my ears, but over time my ears sort of tuned into it. So I know when I used to like a lot of really old school, you know, I always like the sound of sort of old school rap, sort of, you know, Sugar Hill Gang and that sort of stuff. And I'm trying to think of someone else. I did check an album recently and I'm trying to remember the name of the artist. Had a solo album. It's like one of the very first rap sort of hip hop albums. And also, you know, albums like Paid in Full and stuff like that. And sort of, yeah. But then what happened was I didn't tend to like the harder stuff. So I remember listening, because I remember Public Enemy and NWA got really popular with metal fans around the time of Anthrax, sort of Bring the Noise and that sort of stuff. And I couldn't quite get into it. It was, I don't know why it was, it didn't flow for me. But then over time I sort of got into it. So yeah, probably anything that's got a bit of an industrial sound to it. Initially I've had a bit of a trouble getting into, but then over time I sort of mellow it. But it's more just, you know, familiarity and listening to other elements in the music. I think what happens is when you listen to certain styles of music, your ear gets tuned to a certain like musical arrangement or the way the notes flow. I'm not necessarily just talking about melodically, although that's pretty important, but just the way the music feels, like the feel of the music. And I think my problem is always when I listen to music that has initially a different feel, I find it a little bit jarring. And then over time, as I get used to the feel, then I sort of get into it. And that can be lots of different reasons, like, you know, odd time signatures, strange syncopations, anything like that. So yeah, that sort of thing. So it's just familiarity, really, listening to more of it. So maybe just one more question. What is a music-related memory that stands out to you? Yeah, so I do have one, and I always get muddled up as to what gig it was. I think it was... And it's a toss-up between two possible gigs. It was either a Sister Mercy gig around about 85, or a later Mission gig, and it was definitely at what was the Top Rank ballroom. I don't know what there is there now. I think there's a cinema there still. This is in Brighton, by the way, in the UK. So this would have been way back when I was in the UK. And I remember being in the audience. It must have been during them playing. I'm trying to think what was associated with it, and it must have been Temple of Love when they played Temple of Love. So that would make it Sisters of Mercy, because I don't think the Mission did Temple of Love as a cover. And seeing these group of people, it's mainly guys actually, building this human pyramid in the audience. like it's just unbelievable. It went up like about 3 layers up to the ceiling, and that was just, that sticks in my mind. So that's the most awesome thing that I've seen at a gig, is people actually in the audience building this huge like human pyramid in a particular song. And it's made me think of something else as well, is that suddenly the other thing I remember is people coming to and this is probably why I interlinked the two, people coming to a Sisters of Mercy gig, a mission gig, and I didn't realise until I saw it, but they got to a certain song, and literally as the chorus happened, these people had clearly shredded up pieces of paper, confetti, whatever, maybe some stuff that had been handed out. You know, when you're standing there, people stand out flyers, these flyers, and literally on cue, in time with a certain part of the chorus, they all just threw this sort of pseudo confetti, these bits of shredded paper, in the air, and it all came down, and that was really cool. That was, so yeah, those sort of things where there's this sort of like understanding in the audience, where something just happens on cue, and clearly it must be people that, you know, go to a lot of the gigs and just know know what happens. So yeah, that was pretty cool. So yeah, there we have it. So thanks once again for listening. This is really interesting. If you want me to do another one, something similar or a different topic, I will copy these questions in the bottom. If you're in the description, you know, please feel free if you feel like contributing in the comment section. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future video.